What's up, guys? It's Underdog MLB, and today is going to be part 1 of 3 of my Legends wish list for MLB The Show 21. This was a series I did last year, and it's going to be pretty much the same format. 30 new Legends that I want to see in the game next year, divided into 3 tiers. This first tier is players who I could think could get a 90 to 95 overall card in Diamond Dynasty. The next tier will be players who could get a 96 to a 98. And the final tier is players who should get a 99 overall. There are a lot of people who really only get excited for the top tier legends that get added to the game, but personally I get just as hyped for the lower overall cards. There are way many more players in baseball history who are in this 90 to 95 overall range, so it's more of a surprise who will be added. And for some of these players who may excel in a certain area or may just be cool if you're a fan of the team they played for, it's really cool to see them in the game. Last year when I did this list, 7 of my 30 legend predictions made it into the game, which I think is pretty good, and I'm hoping we can get at least 7 right this year. If you want to take a look at all 3 videos from last year, the playlist will be up in the top right hand corner. There will be some players from last year that are still on this year's list, some that made it into the game, and others that I replaced this year with players I'd rather see. So you can feel free to go back and watch those for a couple of extra predictions, but this is my official list of 30, so let's get into it. The first player that I want to see in next year's game is Fernando Tatis Sr., obviously the father to one of the most exciting young players in baseball, Fernando Tatis Jr. I think it's really cool that SDS has added so many family member duos to the game over the last few years, such as Ken Griffey Jr. and Sr., Dante and Bo Bichette, Derek and Pudge Rodriguez, and many more. And I actually did a team build in Diamond Dynasty a few weeks ago with all of the family member duos that I could find in the game. Adding Tatis Sr. to the game would add another duo to this team build, although I can't really see Sr. getting much higher than a 90 overall card. His prime was relatively short-lived, coming in a 2.5-year stint with the Cardinals from 98 to 2000. He did hit 34 homers and had a .404 on-base percentage in 1999, so if they gave him a breakout card from that season, it would be a pretty decent early-game card. He also stole 21 bags that year, but was a pretty underwhelming fielder. His card would mostly be for fun to be able to have him in the same lineup as his son, but I'd still like to see him in the game. Next up on my list is Bo Jackson, probably the greatest athlete who ever lived. Everyone knows Bo Jackson, one of the only players to play professional football and baseball, and excelled at both of them. Bo is already in Madden, so there's no reason not to add him to the show as well. Bo wasn't the most elite contact hitter in the world, and he actually led the entire MLB in strikeouts in 1989, but boy, when he made contact, he hit it hard. Over 3 seasons from 1988 to 1990, Bo Jackson had 85 homers, 251 RBIs, a 124 OPS plus, and 68 stolen bases. Now those aren't elite numbers, but keep in mind, he was putting up those stats while also being an above average running back in the NFL. That is mind-boggling. It's a shame that Bo had a major hip injury in 1991, which caused him to be out of both sports by age 32. Who knows what he could have accomplished if he stayed healthy and played until his late 30s. Like Tatis, Bo Jackson wouldn't have that great of a card in MLB The Show, but he would absolutely get people excited about the game, and you definitely see him in people's lineups if they dropped him early enough in the year. The next 2 players are relief pitchers Joe Nathan and Randy Myers. Relievers are always the most shallow position in the game, especially as far as legends go. For one thing, relief pitchers weren't regularly used until around the 70s or so, and relievers genuinely aren't as popular as starters or position players. So it's always nice to see new legend relief pitchers in the game each year to give more options to pick from. Joe Nathan was easily one of the top closers in baseball from 2004 to 2009. He had an ERA of 1.87 during that span, a whip of 0.93, a strikeouts per 9 of 11.1, and an average of 41 saves per year. Nathan finished top 5 in the Cy Young race in 04 and 06, and also finished top 20 in MVP voting those same 2 seasons. Nathan threw a fastball that sat close to 95 during his prime. He also threw a sinker, curveball, and occasionally a changeup, so a pretty typical pitch mix, but you can't complain about 5 pitches. I could see Nathan getting a 94 or 95 overall prime card from his years with the Twins. The other reliever from this tier, as I mentioned earlier, is Randy Myers. Myers didn't have the consistency of Joe Nathan over his career, but he had a couple stretches where he was really dominant. One was from 1988 to 1990, where Myers sported a 2.07 ERA and a 6.3 hits per nine in an average of 79.2 innings per year. Another standout season came in 1997, where he put up a 1.51 ERA and saved an MLB high 45 games, while allowing just 2 home runs and finishing 4th in the MVP vote. I think that 97 season could make for a really nice veteran card, or I could also see him getting a signature series, both of which would probably be around 90 overall. Similar to a new legend in the game this year, John Franco, Myers was a lefty who played for the Reds and Mets and should probably get around a 90 overall card, just like Franco. However, unlike Franco, who was a finesse pitcher, Myers had a blazing fastball with a slider and 2 changeups. I think Myers would be a great addition to the game, especially as a lefty with velo. The next player on my wish list is the Big Cat, Andres Galarraga. Galarraga was an all-around beast of a first baseman and was an inspiration to many, being diagnosed with cancer twice throughout his career and still playing until age 43. In his first 7 years with the Expos, Galarraga showed flashes of potential, especially in 1988, where he was named to his first of 5 All-Star teams, hit .302, and clubbed 29 home runs to finish 7th in the MVP race. But strikeouts were definitely a problem, as he led the NL in 3 consecutive years from 88 to 90. Galarraga was a solid defender, winning back-to-back Gold Gloves in 89 and 90, but his bat started to slow down over his final 2 years in Montreal and then in a 1-year cameo with the Cardinals. However, Galarraga turned everything around in 1993 when he signed with the Rockies. Galarraga hit an MLB high .370 in his first year with the Rockies and batted .316 overall in his 5 years with the club. Galarraga also hit an NL high 47 homers in 1996 and stole 18 bases as well, which is pretty impressive for a 35-year-old first baseman. His OPS plus through those 5 years with the Rockies is 126, and he finished top 10 in MVP voting 4 out of the 5 years. Galarraga continued the success with Atlanta in 1998, but missed the entire 1999 season with his first cancer diagnosis. Galarraga came back in 2000 and didn't miss a beat, making another All-Star team at age 39. From 2001 to 2003, Galarraga bounced around from the Rangers to the Giants to the Expos, back to the Giants. Galarraga became more of a part-time player during these years, but he was still mashing the ball, especially in 2003, where he hit .301 at age 42. In 2004, he signed with the Angels, but received his second cancer diagnosis. He came back just in time to play 7 games in September, which would be the last 7 games of his career. Galarraga finished his career with 399 homers and sported a 119 lifetime OPS plus. He was definitely a 5-tool player and should get a nice, well-rounded 94 or 95 overall card. Next is Troy Glaus, who was a great power hitter in the early 2000s. His best season definitely came in 2000, where he hit an AL best 47 homers, had a .404 on-base percentage, and had a 150 OPS plus. From 2000 to 2006, Glaus had a 162 game average of 40 homers and 108 RBIs, which is really elite production over a 7-year period. The problem is, Glaus wasn't able to stay healthy for all of that time. Glaus encountered a large number of injuries throughout his career and had to hang up the cleats at age 33. If he were able to stay on the field for longer, I think Glaus would be a lot more of a household name and potentially a 5-run and home run hitter. Glaus was a pretty shaky fielder at third base early on in his career, but definitely improved as his career went along. I think Glaus could have a really nice all-star card from 2000 with over 100 power versus righties and close to 125 power versus lefties. Up next, we got Jake Peavy. Peavy's best years came with the Padres from 2004 to 2008, where he had a 2.95 ERA, a 3.18 FIP, and a 1.14 WHIP. His strikeouts per 9 was at a 9.4 through that span, which doesn't seem that high by today's standards, but he actually led the league in Ks per 9 twice over those 5 years. He also won the NL Cy Young in 2007, so he could be eligible for an awards card from that year. Peavy kind of fell off after he was traded to the White Sox during 2009. He wasn't bad, but he was never as dominant as he was with the Padres. Peavy finished his career with a 110 ERA+, so he wasn't really a standout his entire career, but a prime or especially an awards card from 2007 could get him up to around a 94 or 95 overall. PV threw a 4-seam, sinker, cutter, slider, changeup, and curveball. So SDS has a lot of options to fill out his arsenal, and I think he'd be a really good add to the game next year. My next player is another starting pitcher, this one being Barry Zito. From 2000 to 2003, Zito had a 1.42 ERA+, a 1.18 WHIP, and a Cy Young Award in 2002. In his Cy Young season, Zito had a 2.75 ERA, which isn't all that impressive, and I think the main reason he won was because he won 23 games, which was still a valued stat back then. Zito stayed in Oakland through 2006, where he continued to be an above-average pitcher, but wasn't quite as dominant. However, once he went across the bay to San Francisco in 2007, Zito really fell off and only had one more above-average season in his career. Zito threw a 4-seam, circle change, sinker, slider, and curveball, and his fastball sat in the mid to high 80s. So I think he'd be really similar to Mark Burley, who was a new legend this year, but no one has really used him, so I don't know how well he'd do in the game, but I still think it'd be fun to see him in next year's game. The next player on my list is going to be Kevin Youkilis. I think it would be really interesting to see in the game, one, because of his high walk rate and good defense, especially at first base, both of which are rarities at that position. And the other reason is because of his really wacky batting stance, which I think would be more funny than anything. But you never know, some people whose stances are really weird turn out to be very glitchy. Youkilis' best season came in 2008, where he hit .312 with 29 homers, 115 RBIs, had a 144 OPS+, and finished third in the MVP race. Youkilis had really impressive discipline, as his on-base percentage was consistently about 100 points higher than his batting average, and his OBP was above 400 3 times in his short 10-year career. I think Youkilis could get around a 92 overall and be pretty underrated in the early game. The final player that I'll be talking about today was really my first ever favorite player, and that would be Carlos Pena, because, well, there really was no one else in that awful 2011 Cubs team that was capable of putting the ball over the fence. Pena's best year by far came with the then Devil Rays in 2007, where he hit 46 homers, had 121 RBIs, had a .411 OBP, and an OPS plus of 172, which earned him a Silver Slugger award. I think a Silver Slugger card from 2007 for Carlos Pena would be a really nice card, and one that I would definitely have on my team if it came out early enough in the year. Pena drew a lot of walks, but never really hit for a high average, with 2007 being his only full season with a batting average above .250. But he hit a lot of homers and actually played okay defense, with a standout year in 2008 that earned him a Gold Glove. I know he wouldn't have the most crazy overall card, but boy, would I get fired up if they added my man Carlos Pena to the game. And that does it. Those are my 10 picks for the low overall tier of legends that I hope SDS adds to MLB The Show 21. Let me know down in the comments some of the players that would be in this tier that I didn't mention, but that you want to see in next year's game. As I said earlier, this tier of players is just as exciting in my opinion, because there are so many options to choose from that have nostalgia for a lot of people, so I'm curious who your guys' picks are. I'm hoping to get part 2 of this series out in 2 or 3 days, and part 3 2 to 3 days after that. So make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel so you don't miss either of those videos. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys later.